Thanks for taking a minute to hang out with us. My name is Brian Combs. This is my buddy Wade Thaxton, and we're just going to periodically just put some videos like this together, just to spend some time together, just talking a little bit about what our hope is grounded in, and hopefully it'll help you as you're in your journey, just trying to figure out just the stuff that we deal with in life. Our goal isn't to provide quick, simple, easy answers or just a simple Bible verse that's going to make all of our problems go away, because we know the two things that Jesus promised us is, number one, in this world we'll have trouble, and the second thing he promised us is he's going to be with us to the very end of the age. And so we just want to just meet you with what you're dealing with right now, whether it's a loss, whether it's just a crisis that's come into your life. Maybe you're dealing with a health issue that you prayed hard about and it just seems like God isn't showing up the way you thought he would. Just to be able to speak into that journey for you, just to let you know that there is hope. And Wade, I just take a minute just to kind of share with us a little bit about the way God has worked in your life, just to bring you to that place where your heart is centered on hope.
For sure. I don't know that I can do it in a minute, but I'll try. It's been such a journey, and I can't even go back and understand when that started, maybe at birth. But over the last, I'd say, 12 years, since my brother took his life, is probably when it really started. Throughout most of my life, I had a goal, set it, and I got there. And then after college, it seemed like things didn't go so well. And I guess it was maybe a couple years after college, my brother, committed suicide. And that rocked our world, and just really struggled with how to find hope in the midst of that pain that I was so unprepared for. Then my wife and I struggled with infertility for about 3 years of our marriage, and God provided such a blessing, little girl, and through adoption. And then we struggled through another 3 years of infertility until after we went off all the meds and all the procedures, and 10 months later, after all that stuff was done, God provides a blessing, a boy that my wife was pregnant with. And then the loss of, and the battle with cancer for my mom, and such a tremendously strong woman, provided me a lot of foundation in my life, and a lot of wisdom and encouragement and support. And, she battled it hard and supposedly beat it for 2 different times. And esophageal cancer, which is a pretty tough cancer to deal with, and finally, lost her battle after a surgery. Kind of went the wrong way, and then the latest is, my dad's suicide, and finding him about a year ago, this month actually, earlier this month, and just struggling with where's God in these moments of being in the valley when the vegetation kind of chokes things out, and the foundation I have is right here. And in our church and fellow believers, and that can encourage and support. And so I don't know, I'm glad to be here with you, Brian, and to do this video. And I hope that it's not about comparing each other's stories. It's about finding hope in the one who can provide it, and we both know who that is. It's Jesus Christ. And so I'm happy to be alongside of you, brother.
Yeah. I'm glad to have you in this journey. It's been an honor for me just to be able to walk with you through some of those things. As we'll talk about as we go along here, some of my journey has some similarities to yours. But what we know is that every stage of the journey is unique to us, because the loss of your brother was the loss of your brother, and the loss of my brother was the loss of my brother, and each of those is unique. But what we begin to see is that God provides us a great resource, and not only His presence, but the presence of somebody else just to walk alongside us. One of those verses in the Bible that we sometimes camp on that kind of seem to promise us maybe more than God really promised is that Jeremiah 29:11, where He says, "I know the plans I have for you," declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, and plans to give you hope in a future. And we usually camp on that verse. But in the context of that verse, it's really about disappointment, because at the beginning of that chapter, God has used the prophet Jeremiah to communicate to the Israelite people that they're about to go into captivity, and all of the questions that swirl in their hearts had to have been about what is God doing in this? this is the promised land. What do you, how can God take us out of the promised land? Does that mean now God is taking away his promise? Is God going back on his word because he told us this would be our land? And now he's saying we're going to go to a foreign place, and he says, you know, you might as well hang out there a while. You're going to be there for a bit. Go ahead and just marry and settle down and plant gardens and be in that place for a while, a place of captivity for a while. But he culminates it with this promise. He says, I know the plans I have for you, plans to give you hope and a future, to speak into those moments when we're disappointed with God, when we're disappointed with ourselves, when we're disappointed with the people around us, to begin to whisper into that. And that's why we've kind of made it our theme verse of our care ministry is that 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3. The Apostle Paul simply says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. For just as the sufferings of Christ flow over into our lives, so also through Christ our comfort overflows." And I love the way Paul phrases that, because what we learn of Paul's writings about suffering, when we're first introduced to the guy, he's on the road to Damascus, and the first thing God says about Paul's life is, I'm going to show him how much he's going to have to suffer. And we begin to realize that suffering plays a role in all of this. Not that God brings all that stuff on us, but God works in the mix of all of that to draw us closer to him, draw us closer to each other. You know, it's interesting that as we read through those things, we begin to see Paul give us glimpses of the wounds and the suffering that he endures along the way, where he thought he knew what God's will was for his life, and he spent so much of the first half of his life just pursuing that, trying to be the best of the best in knowing the law and following the law and teaching the law. And when he gets to this place where he has this collision with reality, and it's a lot like what we experience when we go through those times of uncertainty. You know, and we've, as a family, we've been kind of journeying through that, as my wife has been dealing with breast cancer, and you know, the test results aren't coming back the way they're supposed to come back. And
After all those prayers, right?
After all
I've
those
been
prayers.
doing it. I know you have been, and Gina.
And we just go, you know, has God let us down in all of this?
Yeah.
Where is God? And that's when we go back and we remember that Jeremiah didn't just write Jeremiah. He also wrote a second book called Lamentations. And it brings us back to simply understanding that the beginning of this comfort journey is lament. It's coming to a place where, when I don't understand what God is doing, instead of yelling at him, I appeal to him. And I give him permission to begin to speak answers into the questions that I have in my heart. So I think as we go along, that's really what I want us to do in these videos, is just have an opportunity to be able to just unpack that in our own journeys and in the journeys of the people who are going to be watching this. Just kind of fill me in a little bit as you've gone through some of those pretty deep valleys, the loss of your brother, the infertility, the loss of your mom, loss of your dad. As you've gone through those, what have been some of the things that have anchored your soul?
Yeah. You know, different Bible verses. That Jeremiah 29:11 is so powerful. And when I first heard it, I believed, okay, well, this is it. You know, this is my genie. I'm going to rub it. You rub the genie bottle, and he's going to pop out, and I'm going to be prosperous. And that's not true, because we know that he's saying that right before 70 years of trials and tribulations that the Israel nation is going to go through. And so there's truth in the Bible that we have to understand where it comes from, and having a brother like you or you know, some other brothers to come around me to speak truth it has been tremendous. Having people journey along with you, you know, you can't do it alone, and Jesus promises that for us. He says, I'm going to be with you. And there's times when we feel like, and I've spoken and worked with people in Grief Share that feel like, where is God? You know, and I felt like that too. I felt like he was, you know, somehow missed the trials that my brother was going through, you know, that led him to the only answer is to take his own life. But I think you got to have community. You got to, you know, whether it's in a group, support group kind of setting, or if it's, you know, lean on some other people that are around you that maybe have a little bit stronger faith or mature faith. And sometimes it's just reaching out to a pastor. Sometimes it's reaching out to somebody in the community, whether it's hospice or some other organization, and maybe not so Christian funded or founded. We have to have that support in that community to help us through. So that's been one of my biggest things. And whether you talk to somebody that's been through AA or whatever group it is, I mean that's an addict has to have that support. They cannot do it alone. And while we still have Christ, He provides for us people in our paths that can help carry that burden with us. And so sometimes I think I've thought a lot about the word submit. And we probably think it has a negative connotation, especially for a guy that works out, well, if I submit, then I give in, I quit. And submitting to God is really about strength. It's really about allowing God to come in and be a part of that process, and not that it's allowing God to take over and make it good. To use the eraser and erase the pain. It's not going to happen, but to allow Him to work within that circumstance, and then to bring it all the way around to 2 Corinthians, where he says, I'm gonna bring you through this circumstance. I'm gonna be with you in the circumstance or in this challenge, and then I'm gonna provide so much more. And that's the reason why I've done Grief Share. And I put it simply is, I'm gonna do it because somebody else did it for me. And that's kind of that simple, verse or statement. But it's even bigger than that, I think, because now I'm able to minister to people. I'm not just there because someone was there. I'm hopefully taking them and showing them who the true hope is. And you can't do that, in 1 week or 1 day or one talk. I mean, it's a process.
Yeah, there's something powerful about knowing how deep the valley is. Mm-hmm. To be able to walk somebody else through the darkness and the confusion that comes with that. Mm-hmm. That if you've not experienced some of the depth of that, you don't have quite the ability to lead people. And having gone through those deep valleys, it's that promise that God has put in here that that the comfort that you've received, now you'll be able to comfort others. Mm-hmm. And the way He wraps it up is, when He says that for just as the sufferings of Christ flow over into our lives, so through Christ our comfort overflows. We typically want to run away from it. We typically want to hide it, numb it, and blame it. Mm-hmm. What are some alternatives that can lead us toward healing?
Yeah, and I've talked about this in the Grief Share support group. Is often the healthier things are the harder things. It's easier to hide it, numb it, blame it. To drink a drink or to take a pill or to rationalize it's not your fault or it's completely somebody else and direct your anger towards that other person or other entity. So you really have to not allow yourself down those paths, because if you don't make a choice, you'll go those paths. I really believe that. It's get into a community. It's lean into the pain, and that sounds weird, and we could spend another 10 minutes trying to unpack that. It's another one for me is believing beyond the valley, believing beyond your circumstance, and that's what hope is believing that today is not it. This isn't the final chapter. We know what the final chapter is, and I really think that's it. I mean, we could go on with a multitude of tools, but as we said in the beginning, it's not about a verse that's going to apply a Band-Aid and you're going to feel better in 3 days. It's a whole process of really working through it, allowing God to be in the midst of it, allowing others to come around you, making some healthy choices, and that's a whole, whatever circumstance you're in. It could be different if it's addiction versus grief versus financial troubles or marriage stress, so that's pretty much it.
Right. So one of the things you said was leaning into the pain. My guess is anybody watching this, that's going to be their biggest pushback to say, I don't want to lean into this pain. It hurts. Mm-hmm. Why is that so important?
You got to go through it. You cannot go around it. You can't go under it. You can't go away from it. Especially with grief, is you have to process it. You have to go through it, and that is a lot of work. That WORK, it is not easy. you have to feel it. Because if you don't feel it, you put it on a shelf, you'll wind up with, I get the vision of a volcano. One day it's going to come erupting, and you are not prepared for that. And you can't plan for it either. So feeling it, leaning into it, it's not fun, it's not easy, but it is the right way, and it is the healthier way to process whatever that grief, that marriage strife, whatever it is. Because when you work through it, you'll come out on the other end, one, better for it, and then you'll even be equipped to help others to get through it as well.
Yeah, it's a lot like surgery, isn't it? When I can take an aspirin to numb the pain of my headache, but until I go to the doctor and have them actually remove the tumor, I'm not going to get better.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, you can treat the symptoms with whatever easy solution you have, but it's work that gets you through it.
We can miss it if we're not paying attention. This awesome little statement that Paul makes at the end of Galatians chapter 6, where he just says, "For no one can cause me trouble, for I bear on my body the marks of Jesus." And I've wrestled with what Paul was talking about with that. But as you read through that, especially the Galatian letter, you begin to see Paul begins to give us little glimpses of some of the scars that he's experienced in his life. And I think what he's saying is God doesn't erase the wounds, he doesn't erase the scars, but what he does is rewrite them. And it's almost
repurpose.
Like he repurposes them. It's almost like, when you look at a sheet of music, there are several lines on it. If you just play the bass line, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But when you add the other notes in, they begin to frame chords and progressions. And that's how beautiful symphonies are made. And I think that's kind of the picture that Paul is painting for us, is that God doesn't erase the notes, but when we play over the top of our sour and sometimes dissonant notes that we experience in life, we play over our notes, the notes of Christ's sufferings, that those combine together to create this beautiful sound. And that, I think, becomes our worship song. That becomes our anthem, our hymn, our symphony. That when we stand in the throne room in eternity, we're in the wedding banquet hall, and we're looking at the God of the universe, and we're looking at his son in the nail-scarred hands, and he breaks that bread. And as we read in Revelation 5, they can't help but break out in song.
Yeah.
They sing a new song. And I think that's the song that we'll sing. Won't be the removal of, but the redemption of our scars.
Yeah, that's powerful.
And so I think for us, as we continue to journey through this ourselves, we know that we've not achieved all of that yet. We still struggle, and we still have doubts, and we still have uncertainties. There, over the last 3 weeks, I found myself praying the prayer that the dad in Mark chapter 9 prayed. That Jesus comes to him and says, "All things are possible with God," and the dad looks at him and says, "Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief." And I think that it's okay to pray that prayer. It's okay for us to acknowledge, I'm still trying to make sense of this, because we want simple answers, but the reality is we're not asking simple questions. And so as we continue to have these conversations together, my hope and prayer is that it'll be able to give some hope and comfort to those who happen to drop in on us, that maybe along the way they'll receive some comfort the way we've received the comfort, and they'll then be able to pass that on to others. Yeah. So that's ultimately our prayer, is that with the comfort that we've received, we'll be able to comfort you, and the comfort that you've received, you'll be able to comfort others along the way. So as we wrap up, just want to offer that prayer one more time to you. Let's just go ahead and offer a prayer up right now.
Sure.
If that's okay.
Sure.
Father, as we begin this journey, just to be able to provide a handful of tools and resources for folks, just to encourage them. God, I know that the people watching these videos, they're hurting. I know that they're doubtful, and they're trying to make sense of what they're experiencing. I just pray, Father, today that your Spirit will speak into them and just begin to whisper hope. Remind them, Father, that you were already there. No matter how deep the valley they've stumbled into, you were already there at the bottom of it, waiting for them, planning their return journey. And so I just pray that you'll just give them comfort today to know, Father, they are not alone, that you are there in the presence with them, that you are present with them, and that your church family is mobile and ready to be with them too, that there are resources and help available. And however, Father, we can come alongside them, help us to know how to do that well. God, I just pray today that you'll just remind us all just to center our hope on Jesus, because we know, Father, that he's our only hope. Mm-hmm. So we thank you for loving us, and thank you for sending him. And God, it's in his name that we pray this. Mm-hmm. And amen.
Amen.
Have a blessed day.